Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I am your host, Lena, and I'm so excited to be here again today, recording for you another episode about another piece from Dancing the Dream. I have to be honest, I am going through a kind of renaissance right now in my love for Michael. I don't know if it's the October air, the fall festivities and feelings, Halloween coming and Thriller and everything. I don't know what it is, but I'm enjoying Michael so much right now. I went through a bit of time earlier this fall where I wasn't listening to him that much. I mean, I always will tell you, when I was listening to a song on a walk or something and thinking about something related to him. But I mean, really, I went through a period where I really wasn't listening to him very much. And I think sometimes, I think I've mentioned this in the past, actually. Sometimes when I'm dealing with a lot and I get really stressed, I actually sort of avoid listening to Michael because, as weird as this sounds, I kind of want to be able to show up and be present in my enjoyment of his music and of him and watching him and everything. So when I'm mentally distracted, I kind of, you would think I would dive deep into Michael and all things Michael, but I don't always. And so I recently have been again, and it's been so much fun. Last night, I watched maybe about a third of the Dangerous Tour concert in Argentina, which was phenomenal. That was really fun. I watched the Bad music video the other day for the first time in a while, and oh my God, I was having such a reaction. The point is, I am having a great time with Michael these days, and super pumped then to be back here and continue talking about him. It's just so funny because sometimes when I do this, I'm watching him again a lot or starting to listen to him again a lot. The idea that person is the same person writing these really heartfelt poems and essays and things, it's kind of mind-blowing, and I don't know, I love it. It's really, it's a really cool way, I think, to be appreciative of his whole humanity, because you can in one breath be singing his songs and loving his music and watching him just be like a dynamite performer. And on the other hand, you can sit here and contemplate his ideas and look at his life philosophies and interrogate his poetry. And it's a totally different experience. It's a totally different side of everything, which is why I want to say that if you are a Michael Jackson fan who has enjoyed this podcast so far, and other Michael Jackson fans that you think would enjoy it, please share this podcast with them. I relate that to what I was saying a moment ago because I don't know how to promote this. I think of this as we talk about a lot of spirituality and we talk about emotional stuff when it comes to this work. And I know not every fan is here for that. And that's perfectly fine because Michael, the performer and artist and everything, is like his own entity in comparison to this more emotional, personal connection some of us feel with him. So if you're someone who is like me, who really feels both, where you love and admire him artistically and as an entertainer and everything, but you also on a human level relate to or care about him, and you like this podcast, then you may know other people who would like and appreciate this podcast. So again, we're at the end here of this season, but I really would love still to be able to spread the word about this, because while I think that there are so many amazing creators doing amazing work about Michael and his career and everything, I do think in general we need more people talking about and appreciating his lesser known creative work, such as Dancing the Dream. So anyway, that was just a final thought before we get into this week's episode. If you like and appreciate this podcast, please share it in your MJ circles with people that you think might like and appreciate it. So with that said, I now invite you to sit back, relax, get comfortable, get cozy, and enjoy this reading of Quantum Leap. Quantum leap. I looked for you in hill and dale. I sought for you beyond the pale. I searched for you in every nook and cranny. My probing was at times uncanny. But everywhere I looked, I found I was just going round and round. In every storm, in every gale, I could hear your silent tale. You appeared wherever I went, in every taste, in every scent. I thought I was in a trance. In every quiver, I felt your dance. In every sight, I saw your glance. You were there as if by chance. Even so, I have faltered. Despite the fact my life has altered, all my doubts were struggles in vain, judgments made in memories of pain. Only now, by letting go, I can bask in your glow. No matter where I stray or flow, I see the splendor of your show. In every drama, I am the actor. In every experience, the timeless factor. In every dealing, every deed, you are there as the seed. I know now, for I have seen what could have happened, could have been. There is no need to try so hard, for in your sleeve you hold the card. For every fortune, every fame, the kingdom's here for us to claim. In every fire, every hearth, there's a spark that gives new birth. To all those songs never sung, all those longings in hearts still young, beyond all hearing, beyond all seeing, in the core of your being, is a field that spans infinity. Unbounded, pure, is the embryo of divinity. If we could for one moment be, in an instant we would see a world where no one has suffered or toiled, of pristine beauty never soiled, of sparkling waters, singing skies, of hills and valleys where no one dies. That enchanted garden, that wondrous place, where we once frolicked in times of grace, in ourselves a little deep, in that junkyard, in that heap, beneath that mound of guilt and sorrow, is the splendor of another tomorrow. If you still have promises to keep, just take that plunge, take that leap. Okay, so I haven't read this piece in so long. Honestly, I didn't really remember much about it. And now that I'm reading this again, after such a long and slow process of reading this book, I'm having a couple of thoughts. So this isn't just about Quantum Leap, what I'm about to say. I've mentioned a couple of times recently how Michael's formatting of this book as a part 1 that is the vast majority of the book, like 75% of it, and part 2 as like 25 or even 20% of it, is a really odd choice to me, because you typically think of like a part 1 or a part 2 or whatever in a book as being somewhat equal parts. It's such an imbalance that it's almost like, well, why break it into parts? It's a little strange, isn't it? But when I read the original Magical Child piece that started off part 1, and then the second Magical Child piece that started off part 2, I had mentioned that I see that first Magical Child piece as almost an invitation for the reader to kind of learn about and understand what it means to embrace a certain way of living and interacting with the world. And that part 2 was sort of a continuation of that. Like, okay, now you know all there is to know about this. So now let's make it happen. And when I look at all these pieces in part 2, I think what I'm realizing is that I'm seeing more connections between the pieces week to week than I have previously. And while on some level that could be like maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, and that's perfectly valid and possible, I also can't help but feel that this is intentional. Like if the first part of this book, the first 75%, was an effort to explain this sort of philosophy, then the second part, this final set of maybe 10 pieces, is to really hammer them home. And so the repetition of certain ideas that connect to each of these pieces sort of makes sense to me. So I'm thinking about this when I'm reading Quantum Leap because there's some really direct references in this piece that call back to the last few weeks we've had. The first one I noticed was a bit later in the piece. He's saying, "The kingdom is here for us to claim." And that immediately makes me think of last week's piece, Heaven on Earth. The kingdom is here for us to claim. Heaven is here. You know, it's kind of the same sentiment there. He also says shortly after, "To all those songs never sung, all those longings in hearts still young." And that made me think of Breaking Free from a few weeks back, where he talks about all those love letters never sent and that kind of prospect of living with regret. And then as he continues, he says, "That enchanted garden, that wondrous place where we once frolicked in times of grace." And that, of course, made me think of Once We Were There, the piece from a couple weeks ago, in which he's talking about this before and sort of after of when life really began and when we all kind of came here and started this whole human thing. So here's the thing. I'm starting by saying all of this because I don't want to be heavily repetitive in my analysis of these pieces. And that has nothing to do with length. It's just I want to offer something new when I read through these poems as much as possible, or at least feel that I'm really tapping into his overall goal or his overall thesis. So I do plan I'm going to read through parts of the piece, but I wanted to just draw attention to some of those likenesses I'm already seeing so that maybe you can begin to see it too if you haven't already. Like there are many, many connections between these pieces, and it's very clear he's trying to say something quite specific in this book, especially as we're reaching the end. So I'll talk more about that, I think, when we get to the final episode of this season. But for now, let's spend some time focused specifically on this piece. In these first 2 verses, he's talking about the ever-presence of what I believe, again, is about God. Now, I have thought, anything ever-present in life, you could read this about. I mean, it could be about God. It could be about music. It could be like any aspect of his human experience in which he sees and feels the presence of something around him all the time. I am equating it to God because of so many of the themes in the book. But he says things like, "I looked for you in hill and dale. I sought for you beyond the pale. Everywhere I looked, I found I was just going round and round. In every storm, in every gale, I could hear your silent tale." Here's the thing that's interesting about that verse, which that was the first verse. On one hand, he's saying, you are everywhere around me. And again, are we speaking about God, inspiration, anything? I'm going to say God at this point, or maybe a universal power of some kind. Either way, whatever entity or power he's referring to, he's on one hand saying, you're everywhere I look. And on the other hand saying, whenever I go out looking for you, I go round and round. So what I take this to mean is that the reality of the situation is this presence is everywhere. It is in the wind. It is in the rain. It is in every storm and in every hill. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you might look and open your eyes and see. But when you start trying to find something, when you start trying to force yourself to feel something or access something, then it can be very difficult. And I think that perhaps, as I'm thinking about this more, perhaps if we're talking about this as being about God, then we could think what he's saying is God is everywhere and showing himself or herself everywhere at all times. But when you go looking, you have this other idea as to what it should look like to find it. So rather than accepting, okay, it's everywhere around us already, you go looking for it in a certain place or experience or wherever. And I think that's why he says, my probing was at times uncanny. In a way, perhaps, it was both familiar and a little bit unnatural, like we all do this, but it's not really based in reality. I guess what I mean by this is that when you have a certain set of expectations about how or when you will see or feel God or inspiration or connection, and you want it and believe it should look a certain way, then you may not actually be able to see what's right in front of you, which is, hey, it's everywhere, So that's how I took that. But then he continues in the second verse. You appeared wherever I went, in every taste and every scent. I thought I was in a trance. In every quiver I felt your dance. You were there as if by chance. All of this kind of speaking to the miraculousness of that ever-presence. But then he goes on into the third stanza. And this is where he expresses how that alone wasn't enough. The recognition of that ever-presence, the reality of it wasn't really enough. Even so, I have faltered. Meaning, even with all of that knowledge and seeing it and recognizing it everywhere, he has still struggled in his life. But despite the struggle, he says, all my doubts were struggles in vain, of judgments made and memories of pain. So every time he doubted God, every time he doubted these universal forces, it was perhaps based on these judgments and expectations he had for how things should be or what things ought to be, what he believed things would be. And then he says, only now by letting go, I can bask in your glow. And I take that to mean only now by letting go of those expectations of what I think should happen or what the world should be like or whatever. Only when you let go and just accept can you really enjoy it. Can you really bask in the glow? It's kind of like a more simplified experience. Imagine you have these great plans and you're going somewhere and you're looking forward to it. And then the day comes and all these things kind of aren't going the way you expected it to be. Not necessarily anything groundbreaking or difficult, nothing tragic, but you maybe arrive a little bit late, or maybe you hit annoying traffic, or maybe your seats aren't great, or whatever, whatever you may experience that seems like a minor inconvenience. If you let it, that can really detract from your experience. It can make you feel like kind of cheated in some way, that the thing you wanted didn't turn out exactly as you thought it should or that you expected it to. But then if you change your attitude, if you just accept the situation as it is, if you just accept that things don't always pan out a certain way and that it's okay because what you have is still pretty great. You still are at the place, you still get to do the thing, even if every detail is not perfect, then you can finally let all of that go and just bask in your enjoyment of it. You could just be there, be present in the moment and appreciate it. But if you're stuck thinking about how things should have gone differently, then you'll always be unhappy, He continues, no matter where I stray or flow, I see the splendor of your show. And that reminds me of a piece a while ago, and I'm sorry to say I cannot remember the name of it, but it's a piece where he's talking about, this was like a couple months ago, I think, a piece where he was talking about how children look at a puddle and tadpoles swimming in a puddle or in a small pond, and they see the miracle in that we might see with seeing like a whale in the ocean. They can see something miraculous in something very small. So when he says, no matter where I stray or flow, I see the splendor of your show, I feel like that's sort of like, it doesn't need to be something grandiose to really see the splendor in it. and see what's so wonderful about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be big and grand. Everyday experiences can feel miraculous. It's such a lovely thought, honestly. I mean, I think that I imagine a lot of us try to enjoy life to that degree, but I'm sure it takes practice for a lot of people. And it's just such a lovely thought and sentiment, you know? In every drama, I am the actor. In every experience, the timeless factor. And you know what I thought of here? I thought of that Shakespeare quote, all the world's a stage, and the men and women are merely players. I think that's the whole quote. And that's immediately what it made me think of. In a way, everything is a performance. You know, it doesn't mean it's inauthentic, right? But in every way, it's a performance, especially if you see our time here as limited or impermanent in some way. He goes on a little bit later to say something I really just like the simplicity of. There is no need to try so hard. And he says this in the context of looking around and seeing things for what they are and identifying heaven. And this is very close to the line, the kingdom's here for us to claim. But I love the line, there's no need to try so hard. Because obviously I think he means this in a sort of spiritual way. There's no need to try so hard to find it, to see it. If you just open your eyes, it's there. But I think this could really be applied to life in general. Of course, I take great pride in how hard I try for things. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be a person who tries hard. And I think Michael would agree with that. But the idea that there's no need to try so hard is kind of a freeing thought, because doesn't it on some level communicate that whatever you are already is enough? You know, we all have goals, we have things we want to achieve, we have things we want to be. And I really believe that that's important. And I think Michael does too. The idea of being self-disciplined and trying to better yourself and being the best version of yourself you can be in whatever form that takes. I certainly think that would be his perspective. But there is something peaceful and reaffirming about the line, there is no need to try so hard. Whether that's about seeing heaven on earth or about appreciating your life, or whether that's about seeing heaven on earth or about showing up in your day-to-day life, always feeling like you have to make up for something. So many of us feel this way, like we have to somehow make up or apologize for ourselves. And there's no need to try so hard. You know, like we are enough. This world is enough. It's all good. The way I'm saying this sounds very like hippie, but it, you know, I like it. Maybe this is me reading too much into that line, but I genuinely do like that line. So I'll just leave it at that. As he continues toward the end of the poem, there's a part where he's really describing what would be really like a utopian existence, which again is not really the first time he's touched upon this, but he says, if we could for one moment be, so be present, or maybe just be still, in an instant we would see a world where no one has suffered or toiled, of pristine beauty never soiled. So it's interesting here because I think he's sort of blaming our inability to just be as maybe the reason for why there's so much negativity in the world. There's so many bad things. Why we make such bad decisions, both on a personal level and on as a human race level. Why we contribute so much negativity to the world. Why there's so much bad and harshness in the world. He says if we could just for a moment be, we would see a world where none of these problems exist. And I don't know if that's to say it's because our outlook would change, so maybe we would stop seeing all the negative or seeing all the problems, or if he's saying that to stop and be, to just kind of settle and wait and be still, if we all collectively did that, the world would stop turning the way it is, and we would be able to self-correct or reorient a little bit as the human race and correct some wrongs. You know, if everyone collectively just stopped and just was, there could be no war, there could be no violence, there could be no pollution. I mean, everything would stop. So I think he might mean it both ways, and both ways are helpful ways of thinking about it, I think. Obviously, having a positive perspective on the world and life is really useful, and stopping and kind of stepping back can allow us to do that. But also the idea of stopping and settling and being still can make us see life differently and take different actions also. And I think it's interesting that Michael has sort of touched upon utopian concepts or ideals multiple times throughout this book. And I can't help but think, what is the value of a utopian vision to Michael Jackson? I mean, did Michael Jackson believe a utopian vision like this is possible? Did he believe in it? Like, did he truly believe it was possible? Or was he trying to get us all to see that we play a part in all the reasons it's not here, that we aren't in a utopia, and therefore we could play a part in the reasons there could be one, or the way that there could be one? Meaning, this utopian vision is kind of the grounding vision we could all hold in our hearts and in our minds for why we maybe act the way we do or behave the way we do in life. Like, if we all have this shared vision, maybe it will never happen on a grand scale. But if we all every day took actions to try to make it happen, to try to make the world better, as he often says, then we would get closer. I mean, that's kind of undeniable, right? Like, if every single person stopped lying and cheating, you know what I mean? Then nobody would be around any liars and cheaters. And therefore, you would stop thinking everyone is a liar and a cheater. And then you would feel more positive about the world. You know what I mean? Like, everyone would collectively have to decide at once, hey, I'm going to give up this way of being. And so I think that that's sort of the utility of a utopian vision. How can that vision create a shared goal, even if it's not really something we can ever truly achieve? How can it help us get closer to reaching it? And then he finally closes, beneath the mound of guilt and sorrow, in the splendor of another tomorrow, if you still have promises to keep, just take that plunge, take that leap. So again, did you notice a trend here? The last several weeks and several pieces, Michael has ended with a call to action. You're tired of me saying this, aren't you? But it's true. Look at every single one of these pieces. He's saying, if you believe this thing, if you get this, do this if you dare. Are you listening? Take that leap. He is directing. He's not simply reveling in a thought or a fantasy. He is directing. And that seems to be a big theme of part 2 so far. This is directive. If you see it, if you feel it like me, if you look around and you want this kind of world, you want this kind of life, take the leap. And by the leap, the quantum leap, which we can sort of articulate as just meaning taking a big transformative step towards something else. If we're going to do that, if you want all of these things on the other side, you have to. And maybe part of that step is letting go of what we think things ought to be, how we think the world should be, how we think God operates or shows himself or herself, or, if we believe in God or not, maybe that's what he's saying. And I like it. No surprise there. I like it. I like when Michael ends with these kinds of directives. I think it's useful to think about these poems as not just meditations, but action-oriented ideals in which we are being challenged to adopt it ourselves. Whether you do or not is fine. But I think his goal here seems to be not just at this point anymore inviting us to sit in meditation with him on these topics, but to actually do something with the ideas that are resonating here. So I really liked it. I liked this piece a lot. Despite not remembering much about it, I did like it. And I'm developing this whole thesis about the purpose of part 2 that for me is really changing the way I'm viewing it, which is really helpful at this point. So that is going to wrap up this week's piece. I am looking forward to reading our next 2 pieces. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it and just bittersweet also about it. So if you are interested in closing out this book with me, definitely join next week for our discussion of one of the final 2 pieces from the book. For now, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your energy and your interest in all of these things, and for being here today. And as always, I wish you a wonderful week and weekend, and I look forward to next week when I can talk with you all again. Until then, take care.